Last summer, I pulled 62 pounds of tomatoes off 2 plants in my little Sacramento backyard. The year before, off the same 2 varieties, I got barely half that. Same soil, same water, same sun. The only thing I changed was how I pruned them. Here's the thing. Most folks either never prune their tomatoes at all, or they hack away at them and accidentally cut off next month's harvest. I did it the wrong way for years. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I prune now, step by step, so your plants put their energy into fruit instead of leaves. And stick around to the end, because there's one cut I make in late summer that almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason my plants keep producing weeks after my neighbors have quit. Let me put a real number on that for you, because I know it sounds like a stretch. 62 pounds off 2 plants last summer. The year before, off the exact same 2 varieties, in the same raised bed of Sacramento clay loam, I weighed barely 31 pounds on my little kitchen scale. Same soil, same water, same sun pouring over the same south fence. The only thing my hands did differently was how I cut those plants. That's it. That's the whole difference between a decent year and a year where I was handing tomatoes over the fence to my neighbors. Here's the thing. Most folks get this wrong in one of 2 directions. Either they never prune at all, and the plant turns into a leafy green jungle where every leaf is stealing energy that should be going into fruit, and the inside stays so shaded and damp that disease moves right in. Or they go the other way and hack at the thing blindly, snipping off whatever's in reach, and they accidentally cut away the very branches that were about to give them next month's tomatoes. I did that second one for years. I'd grab my pruners feeling productive and cut off my own harvest without even knowing it. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how I prune now in 5 clear steps. Step 1 is knowing your variety, because pruning the wrong type costs you the crop. Then suckers, then choosing your leaders, then stripping the bottom, then thinning for light. 5 steps in order, and by the end, your plants will be pouring their energy into fruit instead of foliage. And stick around to the very end, because after those 5 steps, I'll share that one cut I make in late summer that almost nobody talks about. It's the reason my plants keep handing me ripe tomatoes for weeks after the neighbors' plants have quit. Let's get into it. Step 1. Know your variety, because this is the part that decides whether pruning helps you or robs you. There are 2 kinds of tomato plants, and they behave completely differently. The first kind is called determinate. People also call them bush tomatoes. A determinate plant grows to a set size, somewhere around 3 or 4 feet, and then it stops. It sets all its flowers in a short window and ripens most of its fruit in a couple of weeks. That's the whole plant's plan, all at once. The second kind is called indeterminate. These are the vining types, the ones that just keep climbing and climbing all season long until the cold finally takes them out. Here's the thing, you only want to prune the indeterminate ones hard. Those are the climbers, and pruning them is what makes them put their energy into fruit instead of endless leaf. If you take a bush tomato and prune it the way I'm about to show you, you'll strip off the very branches that were going to carry your entire crop, and you'll end up with a sad little plant and almost nothing to pick. I'll come back to that mistake later because I see it all the time. So before you make a single cut, find out which kind you've got. The easiest way is to check the little plastic tag that came with the plant. It'll usually say determinate or indeterminate right there. If you lost the tag like I always do, watch the plant for a few weeks. If it keeps reaching taller and taller and never seems to settle on a final height, it's indeterminate, and it's a candidate for real pruning. If it bulks up, sets a load of flowers, and then just kind of stops growing upward, leave it mostly alone. Both of my main plants last summer were indeterminate vining types, and that's why the pruning paid off the way it did. Get this one step right, and everything else in this video works for you instead of against you. Step 2. Pinch the suckers early and pinch them often. This is the single most important cut you'll learn, so I want you to really see it in your head. On an indeterminate tomato, you've got the main upright stem and then leaf branches that grow out from it at an angle. Right where a leaf branch meets the main stem, there's a little V, kind of a 45-degree crotch, and inside that V, a brand new shoot starts to grow. That new shoot is called a sucker. Now here's where most people get confused, so listen close. A sucker is not a fruiting branch. It's a whole second stem trying to become its own plant. If you leave every sucker alone, that one tomato plant turns into a tangled bush of a dozen competing stems, all fighting each other for light and food, all making leaves. And that's how you end up with that shaded jungle I talked about. The plant pours its sugar into growing more and more foliage instead of filling out the tomatoes you actually want to eat. So I pinch them. And the timing matters more than people think. You want to catch a sucker while it's still small, under about 2 or 3 inches long. At that size, you can pinch it right off with your thumb and forefinger. It snaps clean, the wound is tiny, and the plant seals it over in a day. I walk my 2 plants every 2 or 3 days during the heart of summer, coffee in one hand, and I just run my eyes up each stem looking for those little shoots in the V. It takes me maybe 90 seconds per plant. That's it. The whole job is 90 seconds every few days. Here's what failure looks like, and I learned this one the hard way in my Sacramento clay loam where these plants grow fast. If you skip a week, those suckers don't stay little. They shoot up to 1 foot long, as thick as a pencil, sometimes thicker. Now you can't pinch them with your fingers anymore. You've got to go in with pruners, and I mean my bypass pruners, the cheap Felco knockoffs I keep on the patio. Cutting a sucker that big leaves a wound the size of a dime on your main stem, and that open wound is an invitation for disease to walk right in. Worse, that fat sucker already stole weeks of the plant's energy to grow that big, energy that should have gone into your fruit. So you lose twice. You lose the energy, and you risk the wound. The fix is just rhythm. Catch them small, catch them often, and you never face a big cut at all. Now, I want to be honest with you about why this one cut matters so much, because it's the heart of how I doubled my harvest. Every sucker you remove is next month's leaves you're choosing not to grow, and every leaf the plant doesn't have to feed is energy it can spend ripening the tomatoes already on the vine. That's the whole trade. You're not hurting the plant. You're making a decision for it. You're telling it, stop trying to become a hedge and start making me dinner. When I started pinching suckers religiously, the difference in fruit size alone was something I could feel in my hand when I picked them. Bigger tomatoes, heavier in the palm, and more of them actually turning red instead of sitting green in the shade. My mentor Gloria taught me to think about it the way she runs her balcony up in San Francisco. She's got a single tomato plant in a container, and she keeps it ruthlessly clean of suckers, because in a pot, there's only so much root and only so much soil to feed the thing. Every sucker she lets grow is one her plant can't afford. Gloria has a saying. She says, "A plant only has so much to give, so help it spend it wisely." 20 years on that balcony, and her container tomato outproduces plenty of people's in-ground plants, mostly because she never lets it waste a drop of energy on growth she doesn't want. That image stuck with me, and it's exactly the mindset I want you carrying when you walk your own plants. Get step 2 right, and you'll feel the win fast. Within a couple of weeks of consistent pinching, your plant looks cleaner, more open, with a clear main stem instead of a tangle. Air moves through it. Light gets down to the lower fruit, and the tomatoes that are already set start sizing up noticeably because nothing's stealing from them anymore. That's the foundation. But pinching every single sucker isn't quite the whole story, because there's 1 or 2 suckers you might actually want to keep, and choosing which ones is where step 3 comes in. Step 3, choose your leaders. This is the step where you stop just removing things and start shaping the plant on purpose. Here's the thing. Every sucker I told you to pinch in step 2 is a potential whole second plant, with its own stems, its own leaves, and eventually its own flowers. Most of the time, you don't want that, because each extra leader competes for the same roots and the same sugar. So the simplest, cleanest way to grow an indeterminate tomato is as a single leader. One main stem going straight up, every sucker pinched, all the energy funneled into that one line of fruit clusters. That's how I grow most of mine, and it's the easiest to support and to read. But you've got a choice here. If you want a little more fruit off a single plant, and you've got the space and the support for it, you can run 2 leaders instead of 1. Here's how I pick the second leader, and this matters. I look for the strong sucker growing just below the first flower cluster. That spot, right under where the plant made its first truss of flowers, tends to throw the most vigorous sucker on the whole plant. I let that one grow. I treat it like a second main stem, and I pinch every other sucker on both leaders from then on. So now you've got 2 clean stems climbing instead of 1, both carrying fruit, and everything else getting pinched off small. Now here's the part I need you to hear, because this is exactly where folks cut off next month's harvest without realizing it. A flower cluster is not a sucker. A sucker grows in that 45-degree V between the main stem and a leaf branch. A flower cluster grows straight off the main stem on its own, usually a little yellow spray of blossoms, and that is your future tomatoes. Never pinch those. I killed plenty of potential fruit my first couple of years because I was yanking at anything that looked like new growth, flower clusters included. Learn to tell them apart, and you protect every tomato the plant is trying to give you. Get step 3 right, and your plant has a clear shape, 1 or 2 strong leaders, and not a single flower wasted. That's a plant that knows exactly what its job is. Now, if you're starting to realize these 2 plants could be doing way more for you than you ever thought, and you want the full system instead of 1 technique at a time, here's where to go. Everything I do with leaders is the foundation for growing tomatoes straight up on a trellis in a small raised bed, and that's exactly what I cover in Chapter 7 of my book, Scaling Up, From Windowsill to Backyard. It walks you through vertical growing and raised bed basics for tight spaces with illustrated diagrams, so even a balcony or a narrow side yard can carry real tomatoes. The book's called The 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol. It's $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. If you're on your phone or laptop, tap the link in the description. No rush. Take a second to pull it up. I'll wait right here. All right, let's keep going. Step 4. Strip the bottom leaves. Once your plant gets to about 18 inches tall, I want you to look down low at the foliage closest to the ground. Those bottom leaves are the first to get sick, and here's why. Every time you water or every time it rains, soil splashes up onto that lower foliage. That soil carries the spores of early blight, which is that brown, ringed spotting that creeps up from the bottom of the plant and slowly shuts it down. A plant-fighting blight is a plant not making tomatoes, so once it hits 18 inches, I clean off all the foliage from the ground up to roughly 12 inches. Bare stem on the bottom foot, leaves above. That gap breaks the splash path, and the spores have a much harder time reaching the plant. Timing matters on this one. I do it on a dry morning, never on a wet plant, because the wounds where I pull those leaves seal up faster in dry air, and there's far less disease moving around. With my Sacramento clay loam, that soil splash is a real thing in early summer when I'm watering deep. So this single step has saved me more crops than almost anything else I do. Get step 4 right, and the bottom of your plant stops being a launching pad for disease. Your plant stays green and working from the soil up, and that's weeks of extra production you'd otherwise have lost. Step 5. Thin for light and airflow, and do it weekly. This is the ongoing maintenance cut, the one you keep doing all season. As the plant fills out, the interior gets crowded. Leaves start shading the very fruit clusters you're trying to ripen, and a shaded tomato ripens slow and stays small. So once a week I walk each plant, and I pull a few of the crowded interior leaves, the ones lying flat across a truss and blocking the sun. What I'm aiming for is dappled light coming through the canopy. If I stand over the plant and the inside is dark, it's too thick. If I can see broken sunlight reaching the stems and the fruit, that's right. Here's the limit, and it's important. I never take more than about 1/3 of the foliage in any single session. The leaves are the plant's solar panels, and the fruit needs those sugars to ripen and to taste like anything. Strip too much, and you trade leafy shade for sun-scalded pale tomatoes. So, a little every week, never a lot, all at once. I use my bypass pruners for the bigger interior leaves and just my fingers for the small stuff. Get step 5 right, and sunlight reaches every ripening truss. Air keeps moving through the plant, and your tomatoes color up faster and fuller week after week. That steady weekly habit, more than any single dramatic cut, is what carried me from barely 31 pounds to 62. Now, before you go out there with your fingers ready, I want to be honest about the ways I've watched this go sideways, including a few I did myself. Mistake 1. Pruning a determinate bush variety like it's an indeterminate vining one. I cannot say this enough. A determinate tomato sets nearly all its fruit at once on a compact frame, so if you go in pinching suckers and stripping it down, you're pulling off the very wood that fruit was going to grow on. That alone can cut your harvest by a third or more, and folks do it every season without knowing why their bush plant came up short. The fix is simple. Identify your variety first before you cut anything, and leave the bush types mostly alone. Mistake 2. Overstripping. Hacking the whole plant bare in one afternoon because you finally got motivated. I did exactly this my early years, got excited, cleaned a plant down to almost nothing, and felt proud of how tidy it looked. Then, the fruit sun-scalded in our Sacramento heat, turned pale and leathery on the sun-facing side, and the plant just sat there, stalled and sulking for 2 weeks instead of growing. The fix is the same limit from step 5. Never remove more than about a third of the foliage in a single session, no matter how good it feels to tidy up. Mistake 3. Pruning when the plant is wet. This is the quiet one nobody warns you about. When the foliage is damp, every cut and every pinch spreads disease spores from your hands and your blades right down the row, plant to plant. You can take a healthy bed and seed it with blight in 20 minutes of well-meaning work. The fix costs you nothing. Prune only on a dry morning with clean hands, and wipe your blades between plants if you've got anything sickly going on. Those 3 slips account for most of the disappointing pruning seasons I've ever seen, and every one of them is easy to dodge once you know it's there. Now, I told you at the start there's one cut I make in late summer that almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason my plants keep producing weeks after my neighbors have called it quits. Here it is. It's called topping, and it's the opposite of everything we've done so far. About 30 days before my first expected cold snap, I cut the very top growing tip clean off each main leader. Out here in Sacramento, my first frost lands somewhere between December 5th and 15th, so I top in early to mid-September. I take a clean pinch or a snip right at the growing point, and then I go down the plant and strip off every new flower cluster that's popped up in the last couple weeks. Every one of them. The first time I did this, it felt wrong, almost cruel. Cutting off blossoms? But here's the thing. An indeterminate tomato never knows when to stop. It'll keep pushing new growth and new flowers right up until the cold kills it. And that late growth can never ripen in time. So the plant is pouring its sugars into leaves and blossoms it will never finish. It's working hard for nothing. When I top it, I take away its choice. I force it to stop chasing new growth and dump every bit of stored energy into the fruit already hanging on the vine. The result is that my existing tomatoes ripen faster and fuller, and I'm still pulling ripe fruit off those plants for weeks. Meanwhile, the folks who skip this are staring at a wall of green tomatoes that the first frost turns to mush. Same plants, same season. One cut. Before I let you go, I want to tell you about the guide I wish I'd had years ago when I was killing tomato plants and didn't know why. A lot of you were growing these in containers and fabric grow bags, not a big yard, and that's exactly the setup I cover in Chapter 4, Container Gardening on Zero Budget. It walks through the grow bag method with illustrated diagrams, even my $3 bag of grocery potatoes, so you can grow these plants for almost nothing. The whole book is The 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol, and it's $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. If you're on your TV, point your phone at the QR code on screen. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link is right there in the description. Go ahead and grab that phone now and pull it up. No rush at all. I'll be right here. So that's how I doubled my harvest to 62 pounds off 2 plants, just by changing how and when I cut. It's the same idea behind everything I do here, growing more real food in small spaces without fancy gear or big budget. If you want to go deeper, the next thing worth your time is how you stake and support those clean leaders so they don't snap under all that fruit. Start small this week. Pick one plant, find one sucker in that little V, and pinch it off with your fingers. Just one. You'll feel how easy it is. Drop a note in the comments and let me know how your tomatoes are doing. I read everyone. Until next time, keep growing your own food, my friend.